So yeah, I mean, just in advance, apologies for my clickbait talk title. The marketing team loves these kind of like 7 or 10 things, or 100 ways to make $1 million in games, that kind of stuff, right? So, but what I am going to tell you about 7 things, but what I'm actually really going to tell you about is how to use or what the kind of state of play is in terms of running live ops and running campaigns with data, and what we see in our platform. Our platform, DeltaDNA, we do a lot of things. We're a lot of different things to different people, but what the main thing we are is we're an engine for taking data about players and player behaviors and using that to engage them, whether that's through offers in game, changing the game behavior, just personalizing the experience to improve both their experience and their enjoyment of the game, and then ultimately, of course, the revenues that the game produces. So one of the things I think is really interesting that a lot of people underestimate is that in the free-to-play business, most of the top grossing games have been there for a long, long time. And in fact, they've been built in such a way to ensure that all of the top grossing games were constructed or have been sort of rebuilt to make sure that they can live almost forever, right? And so actually, if you take the top grossing charts, what you'll see is actually of the top 10 games, 8 of those games are older than a year. They launched in 2017 or even earlier, right? Things like Candy Crush and Clash of Clans launched many, many years ago now. And in fact, if you take even a really extreme view on it, of the top 100 grossing games, 47 are older than 3 years. I mean, you think, maybe 10 years or 15 years ago to say that a 3-year-old game would be one of the best performing games in the world would be mad, right? In the 90s, it was always like, game comes out, buy a new graphics card, run it for a year, like throw that one away, buy another game, buy another new graphics card. That was how it worked, right? Games had a very limited shelf life. Whereas now, actually, because we've got much more games as service, these games are living for a long time. And when you come into that market, it's very tough to start off with. What I looked at as a kind of pair to this is what's the actual revenue production. So when you take a day of revenue in a mobile game, what's the split? Like, where is that revenue actually coming from? So if you take a single day in a long-lived mobile game, so a game that's been on, say, our DeltaDNA platform for more than a year, what you'll see is that about 30% of the players have been there for less than a week. About kind of 15, 20% of them have been there between a week and a month. And then sort of the rest of them have been there for a month plus. So you kind of got about a 45-55 split between really recent players and people that have been there for more than a month. But if you look at the revenue, almost all the revenue on a single day comes from old players, right? So something like 70% of the revenue is coming from players that installed more than a month ago, and even 60% is coming from people that installed more than 3 months ago. So if you're launching a game today and you're like, oh, I want to hit the same KPIs as the top 100 grossing games, you just can't do that because you will not be able to do that until you build up these layers of, I like to think of it as like kind of layers of sediment of players. As you get these older players that stick around like month after month, year after year, you've got this base that you can monetize. And if you can't do that, if you're just washing people through your game, you're just never going to be able to hit the revenue potential that these other games can do. So, what this actually means is that for the charts, and people kind of talk about this a lot, that most of the big games are actually quite entrenched there because the top 100 games have 30% of all the MAU. We know that most people play maybe one, maybe a couple of games. And they're entrenched there because they have all these players that are playing all the time and just generate, each one of them just dribbles in a little bit of revenue, and that makes a massive, massive amount of cash for these game companies. And then they can go and buy more players. And because each player they acquire stays for years and years and years as opposed to days or weeks, they just have this momentum that's unstoppable. And so when you think about building games, you need to think about this kind of trajectory. So what this is I kind of tried to do a little bit more digging in the games on our platform. We have hundreds and hundreds. We have thousands of games. We have hundreds of actually quite serious games with thousands of players or tens of thousands of players a day. What I tried to do is characterize what's the kind of trajectory that most games take, right? So the classic trajectory, I've even seen this on slides already this week, is number 1 here. So this is this chart has months on the bottom and basically some normalized revenue. Don't worry about the y-axis. So what happens is most games are like this number 1 curve, this purple curve, where they kind of shoot up in the first month. Maybe they get featured by Apple. All the energy goes in, and then they just die away. Right? And what we find actually is 65% of games that launch on our platform look like number one. Right? So they have this very classic curve that everyone would say, it's, oh, you know, this is just how games work. You launch your game, goes up like a rocket, then starts to go down, and then, you know, in month 3 or 4, you start thinking about your sequel or your next game or something else that's going to give you another boost, right? But 35% of games look like number 2, where they launch, and obviously they have a big launch. But then what happens is maybe they go into a slight fallow period where they build more content, where they build more live ops, and then they go up again, right? And then what you actually see if you extend this out, this is a 12-month chart, but what you actually see for these games as you extend it out is they just keep going like that. They keep oscillating up and down as they have big seasonal events, as they have big new content drops, they can re-energize their base and keep it going, right? Keep their revenue at a fairly flat level for not just a year, but years and years and years and years by keeping this alive and by keeping this player base engaged. When you actually look at the difference between these games in terms of the early stages, like what are these people doing differently at the beginning to make this game a long-lived game versus a kind of boom-bust game or one that fades away? And really, in terms of the high-level KPIs, you know, most of them are kind of the same, right? Like they have OK retention. I mean, 40% day 1 retention is OK. They have OK day 7 retention. But actually, what the real big thing is a long-term engagement. They're focusing on like day 30 plus retention. You know, you can see in the stats here that the day 30 plus retention for this pool of games is as 11%, which isn't, for big games is a little bit low, but that's still what we see in the average, whereas the guys that fade away just don't worry about that at all. And so, you know, I think this is one of the main takeaways from this part of the talk is, you know, you have to worry about long-term retention if you want to build a long-lived game. And the reality is that all of the big top-grossing games are built that way. So when if you're sitting there thinking, I'm going to make the next Clash of Clans, I'm going to be the next King, you know, that's what King thinks about. They think about long-term retention and how to make a game that lasts for a year, 2 years, 3 years, not how do I make a game that has really good day 1 retention, or how do I monetize people in the first 24 hours. So the next thing I sort of looked at in our system was, you know, how ready are people for this post-launch live ops stuff? Like, what kind of sophistication are they using? Because if you want to have this kind of trajectory, like I said, it's very much about having the ability to change the game quite quickly, about being able to iterate on the game, about obviously, you know, developers and like updates to the game are important here, but you need to have the tools in place to do things like A/B testing. You need to have the tools in place to be able to make offers to players, have run campaigns without having to, you know, get everybody in the dev team to work for months. And so, you know, obviously people can do this within our platform, so our platform allows you to do all these kind of things. So what we can look at is across all of our game base, similar to the stats I showed before, what level are most of people sitting at, right? And what I've tried to do is characterize this as 4 levels, right? So I'm just going to assume that all games that are serious have some sort of task and offer system. Very few mobile games today will be launched without something like that. And you know what I mean? Like a task system that tells you, here's your daily things you should do, or here's the things that you should do next in the game, and the kind of normal progression, or have some sort of carousel of offers, all that kind of stuff. Right? Almost all games do that, so I'm not going to really get into that, because that's just a core part of game design. The next level is the ability to do timed offers. After that is the ability to do targeted, personalized offers, and then finally the ability to do optimized versions of all these things, so you've actually tested and made sure that they all work. So I'm going to go through these one by one to sort of show you how they work in our system. So running timed, I mean, a lot of games run timed offers. They make a lot of sense because they build, if they're used in the correct way, they build a kind of natural cadence to gameplay that the players grow to expect. So, you know, if you run weekend offers, then that means people will come back on the weekend. They'll remember they should come back on the weekend to collect whatever it is that you're giving them on the weekend. If you run a Wednesday offer, because Wednesday's your slowest day, then that's great because the players remember, oh yes, I have to play on a Wednesday because I'll get this really cool thing. So it's really good at engaging players and giving them a kind of appointment mechanic to come back and look at the game. So what we looked at is how does this work in our platform? So we run about 200 million messages a month across about 1 billion sessions. So what we found is actually 60% of the games that are on our platform run some kind of timed offer, right? So a bit over half of the games, you know, it's 1%, 40% of people don't do any kind of timed offers, 60% of people do some kind of timed offers. The people that do offers, they typically run an offer 1 in every 5 sessions or 2 out of every 3 days, right? And you can see that builds a kind of natural cadence to the gameplay, where you're not bugging people all the time, but you are giving them a little bit of a boost, like say 2 out of every 3 days or sort of 1 out of every 5 sessions, something will come up. Now, what I tried to look at is if you look at the sessions with offers in them versus the ones that don't, what's the difference in revenue? And what you find is it's about 30% higher in the sessions with offers. Now, there's probably a few other little things that happen that make that number come out, but it's just a kind of blanket number across you take like the hundreds of games I looked at, and you say, did we make an offer in the session versus didn't we? And you see this 38% boost, which is quite a nice thing to see. If you look in terms of volume, clearly, weekends are much more popular than weekdays, so we send kind of 20 to 30% more messages on weekends. And in fact, you can see here's the distribution of players. So more players play on the weekend, maybe 5-ish% play more on the weekend, but the offers are massively higher on the weekend. So the point here is that it's not just that there's more players, it's actually that people are actively, most games are actively targeting weekends as a kind of strategy. And in fact, 25% of the games concentrate more than half of their targeted offers on weekends. So they basically don't do much during the week, and then they blow up at the weekends. What is interesting, if you look at that kind of uplift measurement that I measured before, and you do it by day, Sunday turns out to be the day with the biggest uplift. But funnily enough, the day with the second biggest uplift is Wednesday. And then the other days are kind of all about the same. So there's a few different ways you can read this. I'm not going to try to over-analyze this, particularly because I'm running out of time. But I thought that was an interesting start. And here are some kind of mechanics that people do, not necessarily tied. I talked a lot about weekends, but not necessarily tied to that. Homescapes has a really cool knitting mechanic that they sort of randomly put up that has a time limit that you sort of engage in it and you get a reward. Obviously, you can also do quite seasonal things. Guns a Boom, I think Game Insights was mentioned before. They do really, really good like full-on festivals for their different seasons that really engage players. So the next thing I want to talk about is targeted offers. So this is where you are trying to make the experience personalized for a particular player archetype, right? Not just making an offer at level 20 or something, but actually recommending content to people. I mean, lapsed and anti-churn campaigns would be considered in this, and also VIP type content. So for people that are big spenders, or I just VIPs in other ways, maybe they're very social and that way they're valuable to you. You want to change the game a little bit for them. So what is the kind of what does the survey say about targeted offers? Well, 48% of the campaigns we run actually have no targeting at all. They just go to everybody. Now, that's not super surprising because when you do start to run, you want to run offers for everyone, and obviously your games have communities, and so they'll talk to each other, and it's important to make sure that you're not going too far that people are actually saying, well, why did I get this and you didn't get this? But still, 48% have no targeting. 37% have some basic targeting, like at the end of a mission or at a certain user level. They're much more built into the game design, though. These are not really personalized. So actually, only 15% of the campaigns that we run have actually any really complicated player targeting at all. So what I'm trying to get at is the minority of games are actually doing any of this. Most games are not thinking about personalized offers at all. If you split it into the two buckets, so you say there's people with basic targeting, so the ones that are just hitting everybody, or they've got like an end of mission promo or something like that, versus the ones that are doing sophisticated targeting, when you actually look at the performance and the number of campaigns they run, is a massive difference. So for the guys with basic targeting, most of them are running kind of, at any given time, less than 15 campaigns, maybe more like 5 or 6 campaigns. And they see some uplift, but they don't see a lot of uplift, maybe 10% uplift compared to not running campaigns at all. Whereas obviously the guys that run sophisticated targeting, they're running hundreds of campaigns, right? All the little micro segments they can think of, they're banging away at them. They're slicing, every day they're adding new things to target a very particular group of their players at a particular point in their life cycle to get more out of them, right? So obviously there's a lot of burden there to run all those campaigns, and that's why tools like ours try to make that easy for you, but they're running a lot of campaigns. But the uplift is like massive. It's like 47%, much, much higher if you're running these kind of very personalized campaigns. And so just a few kind of examples of what they might look like. Here's a kind of lap spender. That's a fairly common thing, but also getting into things like content recommendation, particularly for games that have lobbies like slots games or any other kind of game where you have a lot of content you want to surface to the player. Then actually making sure that that's optimized and you're putting things in the right order and making sure there's special campaigns and special rewards around the content that they like to consume is obviously going to boost their engagement and also their revenue. So I got 20 seconds apparently. Optimize promotions, right? So one of the key things here is that you do all this stuff, and fine, I've got numbers on uplift, but you need to really know, like, I had a world of things I could do. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the optimal thing? So actually, A/B testing and stuff, and even taking it one step further to actually model it and optimize it that way is really important. Actually, what we find is only 5% of all of these guys that we're talking about before are A/B testing the vast majority of their campaigns. So when you look at the kind of readiness for what people are doing on our platform, and I probably shouldn't slag off our clients this badly because I know some of them are in the room, but only 5% of the games on our platform are actually using it to their full extent and actually getting the value that we can see is there. So I mean, my point of this I'm trying to get at is that the vast majority of games out there are just not state of the art in terms of this kind of strategy yet, which I think is both, it's good and bad, right? There's an opportunity there. If you're coming into this and you think, oh, these guys are so clever, are never going to be as good as the other games. Well, actually, only 5% of games are actually doing super clever things, so it's actually pretty easy to get ahead of the curve. But the ones that are doing it are getting a proven return out of it. So, without further ado, here are the 7 CRM strategies. I have to do this because I feel the talk has this title. But these are the 7 kind of main points to take away from the talk, is that, if you want to have a high ARPDAU, you want to make money out of your games, you have to nurture the players for months. You have to build these sediment layers of players in your game. If you're just washing people through, you're never going to really build a high revenue game. And what that means is that long-term retention is really important. You need to make sure that you can retain people 30, 60 days. We see that sending offers 2 out of every 3 days is kind of the norm. So if you're hitting that, that's around the benchmark. If you are sending offers, you will see an uplift, as long as you're not doing something totally crazy. Timing is everything, so whatever. I don't necessarily think that the weekend is good for everyone, but you need to look at your game and look at the right times to kind of promote people, whether they're fallow periods or you're trying to do more at the times when people are online. Targeted offers outperform broad ones by like 3 times, and then A/B testing is really important. And I'm sure there was 7 on this slide, but anyway, it only says 6. So, sorry, that was a bit of a fast tour through those slides, but I'll leave it there and take questions. Thank you.
Fast, but full of information. Thank you very much. Hey, a whole bunch more people snuck in. Great. I hope you caught a majority of that talk. Tons of really useful data on that. Do we have any questions? Anyone have any questions you'd like to ask? Well, I'd love to actually get things started with a question. I love the fact that you've gone into a lot of detail on how you present offers. What kind of offers tend to be the stickiest? Is it usually just in-app currency packages, or what variety of offer types have you seen work really well?
So what I think from a design perspective is better is actually sync. So, I mean, one of the better ways to set the game up, I think, and this isn't just my personal opinion, is that if you can engage people to sync their currency, then it's much better to then drive normal monetization. Now, you can pair them to say, like, well, here's a really good sync, like, here's like an amazing thing that's discounted in virtual currency, or here's like some high-risk mechanic, like a gambling mechanic you can engage in, and if you win, you'll get this awesome thing, but if you lose, then you're going to sort of have a sync. So having a sync in first, and then pairing that with either an offer or just a natural flow through to monetization works really well, because in that situation, you're not devaluing your store. One of the most dangerous things people do is they have like here's a 95% off offer, and everyone goes, yeah, that's great, I'll buy it. But then next time, they're not going to go to the store and buy something at full price. So I think trying to have that balance of getting people to actually engage in the content and buy stuff with virtual currency, and then driving
people a way to use the currency, so you have a shortage of cash that people want to replace, or if people are going to buy more currency, give them a place to use it so they don't have too much and never buy again.
Yeah, so I think the economy balancing here is much more important than just the drive to spending.
That's a great idea. Any other questions? We have a question over here.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. 2 questions. First, can you elaborate on the data set that you used for the peaking games and then that are growing more gradually?
Yep. So whenever I do these talks, I always just look at iOS and US mobile.
What's the sample size?
It's like 500 games.
Okay. And
I mean, the minimum. What I usually do is I cut at a minimum size of 50,000 MAU.
Thanks. And then secondly, have you noticed games that have peaked, then declined, and turned around after that? between those two categories?
Yes, yes. It's more of a. It's interesting because, this kind of approach is more modern. So, a couple of years back, not as many people were thinking about it. We saw a lot. You think about what our toolkit really is. It's a toolkit to do this stuff. So we see a lot of people coming in without the expertise to do this, and then applying the stuff and coming back. Of course, one of the challenges here is that what you want to do is have a big boost and get all your players in and then hold on to them. So if you've already dropped off, you have to go back through that kind of relaunch. So then it's a question of, do you reskin it? Is it actually a version 2, or do you just kind of pump it back in? Because one of the challenges, or do you run a big sort of re-engagement campaign to bring all the players back in that were in there at the beginning? So there's a few extra kind of things you need to do if you've gone through quite a big fallow period, as opposed to just kind of kept that steady level.
Great. Thank you very much, Isaac.
Cool.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Isaac. Yay.